Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk about two of the most corrupt government agencies in the United States. But first, I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com. You know the drill. You can get all of our latest content. You can sign up for our email newsletter and make sure you don't miss anything. I also want to remind you guys that we are not on Facebook, we are not on Twitter, we are not on Instagram, but you can find us on minds.com/theconsciousresistance-network, where we're trying to grow our platform over there. And of course, you can find us on YouTube. So today we're going to talk about 5G. We're going to talk about the FCC and the FDA. And really, I mean, it's hard to kind of understand or decide who is the most corrupt government agency in the United States when you have such a plethora to choose from. You have the FBI, known for spying on its own people, and for the counterintelligence programs of the 60s and 70s and supposedly no longer. You've got the CIA overthrowing governments, planning assassinations, planning false flags, infiltrating the media. I mean, it's really hard to decide who takes the cake here. But I think that the FCC and the FDA are now giving the FBI and the CIA a run for their money in the race to be the most corrupt agencies in the United States. So let's check out this first story. This is coming from an article that I wrote yesterday, which you can find on theconsciousresistance.com, called U.S. House Commerce Committee Accuses the FCC of Collusion with Big Wireless on 5G Rollout. And what we have here is that Frank Pallone, who is the chairman of the U.S. House Commerce Committee, he sent a letter to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, asking for copies of communications between the FCC and the corporations involved in the current rollout of 5G fifth-generation cellular technology. Interestingly enough, this article was not published in the United States. It was published in the UK Register. You know, it's kind of interesting. I've heard that from Seymour Hersh and others, that they can no longer get their most critical pieces published in the United States. They have to go elsewhere. And that might be the case for this one. But the UK Register reports that Pallone's letter seems to indicate that the House Commerce Committee may have spoken to a whistleblower. The letter reads, quote, "It has come to our attention that certain individuals at the FCC may have urged companies to challenge the order the Commission adopted in order to game the judicial lottery procedure, and intimated the agency would look unfavorably towards entities that were not helpful." So essentially what we're getting here is that this guy, Pallone, he doesn't elaborate on where they got the information, but he's claiming that somebody within the FCC put pressure on the big wireless telecommunications corporations, encouraging them to challenge a 5G related rule in order to prevent it from ending up in a courtroom where it would likely be overturned. So let me just kind of get out of the jumbled language there and break it down. The FCC is supposed to be in charge of communications and things like cell phones and wireless communications and the 5G rollout. They passed a rule related to 5G and the rollout of 5G that we've talked about. This rule back in September 2018, it gave the federal government complete control of how the rollout's going to take place, and it took away the power from the local municipalities and the cities and the counties and the states, and it gave it to the federal government. And of course, we know that the federal government is closely tied to all these industries. So I guess what they did is a preventive measure. They're like, okay, it's going to get challenged, and if it gets challenged in California, then we will lose, because California typically is one of the places that fights for health causes the most, and California definitely seems to be one of the places that is most aware of the issues with 5G, and there are a lot of people fighting that. So Pallone alleges in his letter that the goal of this little operation, this collusion between Big Wireless and FCC, was to move this potential legal challenge out of the state of California to a more friendly judicial environment. And the Register notes that all four mobile providers or operators challenged this rule with their own lawsuits. So all of a sudden, they all filed lawsuits. They filed them in different places, and the lawsuit is basically saying that the 5G rule was insufficient, and that it should have included provisions which would allow them to get automatic adoption of new cell sites. So basically, let's say Verizon puts in an application for a cell site near your house in your city, and the city council or local bodies take too long, or they don't respond quick enough. Or maybe they have a deal with the wireless companies to not respond at all. That would lead to an automatic approval. So the companies are saying, look, if they don't meet their own deadlines, we're going to have to sue them, and that's going to waste time and money, and we just can't do that. So they were fighting for a rule change which allowed them to just get automatic approval. And this move, it kind of just blew the minds of the people who were paying attention, because the FCC had already given, big wireless billions of dollars in benefits. And what eventually happened is that these lawsuits were filed in 4 different districts before they were ultimately consolidated into one case and moved to the 10th Circuit, which covers Utah, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, and Wyoming. So essentially, they got it done. They did what they were able to do. And the Register reports, quote, "As crazy as that sounds, given what we know of the FCC under Chair Ajit Pai, is it all too possible? It is all too possible. Not only has Pai's office pandered to big cable to an excessive degree in the past 2 years, pushing through changes vehemently opposed by everyone that isn't one of the main telecos, there have been rumors that the regulator is actively working in secret with companies it is supposed to oversee. A series of unusually aligned and coordinated responses have long raised eyebrows." And indeed, back in February 2018, it was reported that FCC Chair Ajit Pai was under investigation by his own agency after allegations that he helped Sinclair Broadcasting further consolidate their media empire. And is this the guy you want to trust? And the article goes a little further into the situation if you want to get into that. But I mean, essentially what we have here is, and let's just understand this. The FCC is made up of both Democrats and Republicans. The people who are challenging Frank Pallone, I do believe he's a Democrat. This could just be, it's posturing more than likely. We know that both parties are in the pockets of the corporations and they work together with them. They collude with them. This is actual collusion, not some fake Russian collusion. And they may just be trying to take a stance to make themselves look good. You know what I mean? Like, they know that nothing will actually come of this, but they can take a stance and say, oh, look, we're standing against this wireless big FCC corruption. But the same thing was going on under Obama's watch, and it will continue afterwards. And then just briefly related to this 5G news, Huawei, who is the Chinese company who supplies and makes the 5G equipment and other cellular equipment, has now been officially charged by Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. And basically, Huawei's CFO is facing charges, and they're accusing them of trying to spy on Americans. And most countries now, Western nations, Australia, the UK, and America, are banning any companies from using their products. And this is really creating a kind of what they're calling the race to 5G. This is the Cold War race to see which nation, China or the US, can gain dominance in the future infrastructure that's going to change everything about our world. And interestingly, everybody's giving shit to the Chinese, saying like, well, if we take Chinese equipment and we put them in place, then they might use it to spy on us. Yeah, that should tell you that they can use this equipment to spy on to spy on you. So whether it's the Chinese government or the US government, the capability is there. So you need to look at the bigger picture, look between the lines. They're telling you that this can be used to spy on you. Otherwise, why would they be worried about what the Chinese are doing? Now, let's give the FDA a little bit of credit for their own corruption here. Of course, the Food and Drug Administration is supposed to regulate and protect people from food and drugs and other things like that. But new reports are showing that's not really taking place at all. In fact, the first story here relates to the opioid. Both of these are related to the opioid crisis. And it says that the Massachusetts Attorney General is targeting Purdue Pharma, one of the companies, and 8 members of the Sackler family who own the company, alleging in a lawsuit that they are, quote, personally responsible for deceptively selling OxyContin. And you guys may know OxyContin is a very powerful opioid, which many people have got addicted to and died. I have friends who've gone from, having a car wreck and an injury, taking opiates, and then next thing that you know, they're hooked on Oxy, then they're trying to get off Oxy with Suboxone, then they're shooting heroin, and they die, right? This has happened all over the world. And some doctors have gone to prison for this, for knowingly prescribing medicines to people and getting them addicted. But what of the companies? What of the families and the individuals who are behind this and who are funneling the money into this? Attorney General Maura Healey sat down with CBS this morning recently and alleged that the Sackler family hired, quote, hundreds of workers to carry out their wishes, pushing doctors to get more patients on opioids at higher doses for longer than ever before, all while paying themselves billions of dollars. In her lawsuit, the Massachusetts Attorney General names 8 members of the family that own Purdue Pharma, saying that they allegedly micromanaged a deceptive sales campaign in the conclusion to the complaint. Healey said the Sackler family used the power at their disposal to engineer an opioid crisis. And according to the CDC, almost 400,000 people died from opioid deaths between 1999 and 2017. So obviously a massive increase in this. And Purdue Pharma is just saying, oh, they're just trying to vilify the drug maker. And the Sackler family says, the Attorney General says they don't want to accept blame for this. They blame the doctors, they blame the prescribers, and worst of all, they blame the patients. That is, I think, a pretty disgusting part on this. And in a statement, Purdue Pharma says, Massachusetts amended complaint irresponsibly and counterproductively casts every prescription of OxyContin as dangerous and illegitimate, substituting its lawyers' sensational allegations for the expert scientific determinations of the Food and Drug Administration. So we're going to get into that in a moment, right? Because the Purdue Pharma is saying this is just some lawyer. She's being she's being sensational here. She's ignoring the expert scientific determinations of the Food and Drug Administration and completely ignoring the millions of patients who are prescribed Purdue Pharma's medicine for the management of their severe chronic pain. And they go on to describe their kind of counterpoints to this, and I'll let you guys look into this on your own. But about this idea that the FDA is just protecting us, and we should not listen to sensational words from the Attorney General, and we should listen to the expert scientific evidence of the FDA. Well, check this out. Just last week, it was reported that the FDA's opioid advisor accuses the agency of having direct links to the crisis. This is an exclusive reported by The Guardian, saying that the head of the Food and Drug Administration's opioid advisory team says officials are manipulating process to benefit Big Pharma. The Food and Drug Administration is sacrificing American lives by continuing to approve new high-strength opioid painkillers and manipulating the process in favor of Big Pharma, according to the chair of the agency's own opioid advisory committee. Dr. Rayford Brown told The Guardian that there's a, quote, war within the FDA as officials in charge of opioid policy have failed to learn the lessons of the epidemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of people over the last 20 years and continues to claim about 150 lives a day. Brown accused the agency of putting the interest of narcotics manufacturers ahead of public health, most recently by approving a terrible drug, Disuvia, in a process that he alleges was manipulated. Quote, they should stop considering any new opioid evaluation. For every day and every week and every month that the FDA don't do the right thing, people drop dead on the streets. What they do has a direct impact on the mortality rate from opioids in this country. Brown's comments have echoed criticisms by U.S. senators who have condemned the FDA for what they say is complicity in the epidemic for approving the powerful painkillers that drove the crisis and then failing to use its powers to protect the public as the death toll escalated. 4 U.S. senators have written to the head of the FDA, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, which, by the way, has huge ties to Dr. Scott Gottlieb, has huge ties to the pharmaceutical industry, and he was appointed by Donald Trump. And yeah, they're approving stronger, more dangerous drugs that are going to get out there and they're going to get into the hands of people. And at the end of the day, yes, if people want drugs, they will get drugs. But do you think it helps the situation if the people who are supposed to be freaking regulating and keeping you safe, if you actually believe that, are going to be just feeding the drugs? I mean, this is more than ever. Like, we've already understood in the past that the people in charge are okay with drugs as long as they're the drugs that they approve of. And we know that, right? And I thought about this really long and hard because all of you are on drugs. I guarantee you're on some drug of some kind. You probably had your coffee this morning. You had your sip of alcohol last night, or when you're settling in from work. You've had your cigarette, your nicotine fix, or maybe it's your sugar high. Everybody's got some sort of drug that they're on, and these are drugs in the truest sense because they alter the chemistry of our brain, right? And that's just the facts of the life that we live in. But what really seems to matter is that people don't approve of the drugs, obviously if they're not legal, if the state doesn't approve of them. But it seems like the only drugs that are approved are the ones that, if you're not causing anybody significant harm, right? So you can go about and destroy your own life, but if you start messing with other people, then it becomes a hassle for other people, and so you're supposed to go to jail, or you're supposed to be treated in a sad way. But if you say, oh, I'm no good unless I wake up and have my cup of coffee, or you say things that if anybody else said them in relation to other illegal drugs, they would be called a drug addict, you get away with it, right? I always find that hypocritical. As somebody who is a former drug addict and who has spent time around drug addicts and has a family of drug addicts, it's a little disheartening, I think, to realize that the world is filled with drug addicts who don't even recognize it. And what is the answer to this, guys? What is the answer to the fact that we have corrupt agencies in the FCC and corrupt agencies in the FDA? I mean, I wish I could say the easy solution I always do, which is to opt out, to stop supporting these systems. Absolutely, that's the case. Stop paying your taxes towards the federal government whenever and wherever possible, and just don't feed into these things. Opt out of them. Educate people. Spread awareness. Tell people what these agencies are about so that they start taking their health into their own hands and they don't just blindly trust when the FDA says this is good for you, when the CDC says this vaccine is good for you, when the FDA or the FCC says their products or their services are good. The FCC says, oh, 5G is safe. You want to think for yourself and question for yourself. And that's what we're trying to do, is build critical, free thinking, powerful, beautiful, free human beings here at the Conscious Resistance Network. And I hope that that's what you guys are into. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be rough coming up in the coming years as the United States becomes more and more corrupt. If you haven't seen, the corruption is becoming more and more out in the open. Less and less people are reporting on it because, once again, the corporate media is controlled and partnered with the people in charge. But as long as we can maintain some level of independent voices on the internet or by printing out flyers and passing them out and telling people that these things are going on, we can keep this message alive. But it's going to take you and me. I can make videos, I can write articles, but I need you guys to share them. I need you guys to reblog them. I need you to print them out. I need you to project them onto buildings. I need you to shout, from a soapbox about them. Do whatever you do. Just keep the information moving. Keep it spreading, because we are completely user supported here. Without your help, we wouldn't be able to do these things. And I'm thankful every day that I can share some messages and some information to you guys and connect with you all on some level. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. There should be a new video tomorrow. And yeah, stay tuned, guys. Till next time, remember, you are powerful, you're beautiful, and you're free. Peace.